Bringing the A-team, Lauren Claffey, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Public Affairs, Department of Homeland Security. Welcome back. Leslie Marshall, Progressive Radio talk show host, Fox News contributor. Connell McShane, anchor of After the Bell on the Fox Business Network. Great panel. Nice to see you all.
Good morning.
Happy New Year to you. There's a lot of different angles we can dissect here. I think it's significant what Mike Emanuel describes there, this War Powers resolution. It is non-binding. However, there, in all likelihood, will be a vote later this afternoon, and it will likely have the votes to pass. That being said, big diplomatic test for the president this past week. How'd he do?
I think we could say that he has been successful in the primary goal, which is to deter Iran from achieving a nuclear weapon, right? And so this maximum pressure campaign is obviously working. And the fact that I agree with your previous guest, Mark, that said that he very much wanted to draw a line in the sand about killing U.S. personnel, and then he responded and Iran backed off. However, I will say that this is really important that he brings in the diplomatic community, and that is a weakness so far that we've seen. And I would say that that's kind of the one mark against the president at this point. He really needs to shore up support to make sure that our allies are also applying maximum diplomatic and economic pressure to make sure that we continue to push Iran away from nuclear weapons.
Connell?
I would take the so far so good argument. A lot of what we do at Fox Business obviously is seen through the prism of the financial market reaction. And I think the other night when the operations from the Iranians started, you saw how quickly markets, not only stocks, but the price of oil reacted, shooting up 5%. Just as quickly when we found out there were no casualties, when the president came out the next day and said that his view Iran was standing down, the price then backs off by 4 or 5%.
Brand new highs this morning, by
exactly. So that kind of feeds into that so far so good argument, obviously not knowing what the next steps will be.
Before we go to McConnell, Leslie, go ahead and jump in here on how you think the test has gone so far.
I think it depends who you ask, obviously. I mean, you know, left or right, and you look at the polls. To your point about stopping Iran, actually, we went from preventing them from creating a nuclear weapon in 15 years to less than 5 with this action. And the Iranian experts that I have spoken to said, this is not over. You know, many of us are breathing a sigh of relief and saying, oh, there's no World War II. That's that was a hoax. But we still don't know, and still are very fearful and should be, of terrorist attacks, cyber attacks, and attacks on the Navy.
To that point, we could be at the very beginning of the next chapter in the story. Let's see.
Now to impeachment, Connell. Some Democrats now breaking with Nancy Pelosi saying, if this is urgent, send over those articles to the Senate. Let's get going.
Well, it's all about political timing now, and don't you lose some of your leverage, to the point of Dianne Feinstein and other Democrats, if you don't send over the articles sooner. I mean, the only way to kind of see this, and I'm not sure why Speaker Pelosi has delayed as much as she has, but the only way to kind of see this and analyze it is through the prism of the 2020 presidential election now. And you still have 5 Democrats from the Senate running for president. But is there really a quote unquote good time for them to send up these articles now? So the 8th of January, right? The Iowa caucus, the 3rd of February, a week and a day later is New Hampshire. March 3rd, Super Tuesday. So if you're looking at it from there and saying, well, here's the time we should do this because it's it makes the most political sense, there really is no quote unquote good time. So sooner rather than later would seem to make sense in a lot of ways.
Leslie, I want to quote Mitch McConnell on the floor just now. The House may keep this cloud over the president if they choose, but they do not get to keep the cloud forever. What's her next move?
Well, she said all along, and I believe she'll do what she said, as she pretty much has throughout her career, that she is going to send them over once the rules are set. This is obviously a game of who's going to blink first and chicken at this point, which is unfair, quite frankly, to the American people on both sides, because Leader McConnell has the votes to set the rules. She said, I'll send the articles of impeachment when you set the rules. The American people aren't stupid. They're watching him today, what they're saying, and some of them are going, then set the rules and she'll send them over. And that's what needs to happen. The fact that there are more Democrats that are coming out and saying, let's do this already, does show that there is a concern about the timing, because there are so many of those Democratic nominees for president, or candidates for president.
I think you're probably going to get movement in the next 48 hours. To that point, Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware, I respect the fact that she's concerned about whether or not there will be a fair trial, but I do think it is time to get on with it. Senator Feinstein, California, the longer it goes on, the less urgent it becomes, to your point, Connell. So if it's serious and urgent, send them over. If it isn't, don't send it over, end quote.
Yeah, I think that you're going to be hearing a lot of that. And, you know, the interesting part about this is that I really think that Pelosi was using this, and Schumer in concert, as more of a messaging exercise to frame up, to take away the Republicans' talking point that this was the sham impeachment, kind of set up their messaging and their campaign ads for the Senate 2020 races, that this was going to be an unfair trial, that we should have had more witnesses available, those types of things. And I think as the longer this goes, the more that narrative turns, especially as McConnell continues to kind of make light and make fun of the fact that Pelosi, in his mind, doesn't have any leverage on this. So, you know, if he's not blinking, then she's losing the messaging battle.
This whole idea of a cloud over the president, though, that's been brought up, is kind of interesting to talk about. I don't know if it's true or not, but it may be, you know, from the Democrats' political perspective, the best kind of tool that they have left in their arsenal, right? I mean, if you look at the economic win that is clearly at the president's back, no matter what you think of his policies, Financial Times has a poll out this morning. For the first time, a majority, 51%, see that the president's policies are helpful for the country. They're either, you know, strongly or somewhat helpful on the economy.
Which gives Republicans a case to move on. And Mitch McConnell just said on the floor, if the House does not send over impeachment articles by next week, the Senate will move next week to get on with other issues. To that point, Leslie.
Well, to that point, I've always said, and people get, you know, angry with me, that this is not political. Because if it was political, this isn't necessarily a win. I wouldn't do this if this was purely politics. But speaking to politics, speaking about the voters don't care left or right about this issue when they go to vote. So when you talk about a cloud, it's not a win for Republicans. It's not a win for Democrats, because this doesn't matter to voters. The economy matters to voters, but so do other issues like health care. And if you look at states like Arizona, where you have Biden and Trump head to head, and Arizona is a pretty red state, right. I would expect a far larger margin that the president should have over any Democrat potential nominee that way, but with the economy this
how is it not a political process if the outcome is nothing but a foregone conclusion? I mean, there's no one that expects the president to be convicted in the Senate. So moving forward, if it's not political, you move forward with something that you know, a trial that you essentially know you're going to lose.
Yeah, that's why I think that Schumer has really set this up to put, you know, the 2020, the vulnerable Republican senators on the record on some things and set up his kind of campaign attacks against them, because it is a foregone conclusion. Like any glimmer of hope went by when Murkowski and Collins, you know, lined up with McConnell last week, saying that they weren't even going to challenge the witness process and the fact that they were going forward with the Clinton impeachment precedent. So I really do think that this is more about politics. It's more about 2020 Senate control, because the Democrats cannot do anything until they regain control of the Senate.
Are you worried about cracks in the dam? Lindsey Graham's point.
No, I'm not worried about cracks in the dam. The reason I say it's not political is if you look at more than 24 Democrats, over 30 Democrats are in red Trump districts that voted for Trump, that support the president. 22 of those are freshmen. Those freshmen voted, those more than 30 voted to impeach the president at their own political peril in their districts. So if this was purely political, they would have already cracked.
All right, you got in the final point there, Leslie. Thank you to our A-team this morning, Lauren and Connell.
See you, Connell. Thanks. Lauren, thanks. Leslie.